Hello everybody, welcome to the stream. Just doing some research prior to the episode. Pretty worked up about this infrastructure and spending bill. Did not think it was going to go this way, but here we are. So what I thought I'd do, if you guys wanted to have some discussion, talk about any of the items that will be in the episode, I figured I'd sit here and while I do my research, we could have a discussion if you wanted to. What I'm doing is I'm putting together my episode plan. Usually I do it in a Google Doc like this, just notes, and then I kind of type up a script, but right now I'm just kind of fact gathering. This is actually from my July 21st episode, and a lot of the facts that I use in that are relevant just because it shows what's in the different packages that I want to talk about in the episode. This is the current one. Currently, there is no format to it. Just kind of throwing it together, but hopefully I'll be recording this episode today. We're going to be talking about the infrastructure bill and the spending bill and Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema. We get the progressives fighting the moderates basically on this bill. And there's way too much controversy over this, as far as I'm concerned. I really think that this should have gone a different way. I'm actually pretty disappointed with the Democratic Party on this one to this point. So that's kind of what I'll be expressing during the episode. So this is kind of from my past episode, this is called the Budget Reconciliation Plan. This is how they're trying to pass this $3.5 trillion budget, is through the reconciliation process, which just means that they're going to try to shove a bunch of policy and spending items into the budget and pass it along party lines instead of going to a normal vote, which is a loophole, but they use it all the time, both sides. So what it's trying to do here is just kind of go over what's in the bill. It's also called the American Families Plan. It's been part of Biden's agenda since day one. So what I'm trying to do is, break out the cost of the bill compared to what's in it. And then I'm going to, in the episode, I'll deep dive a little bit more into the situation and kind of talk about, what the battle is. Because tied into this bill is the infrastructure bill, which everybody agrees on. A lot of Republicans are on board with the infrastructure bill. It's a $1 trillion infrastructure bill. It covers a ton of infrastructure, from roads and bridges to your broadband, to even like climate infrastructure, what they call, oh man, words are escaping me right now. Resilient. There we go. Resilient infrastructure, which means that after you build the infrastructure, it will stay standing in, if a disaster comes in or if the sea levels rise and stuff like that. So basically I'm just going to go through this. So as I go through, I'll just kind of talk about what I'm looking for, why I'm looking for it. And if you have a comment you want to throw out there, we can talk about it. If I come across something, you say, well, why are you looking that up? Or I disagree with that, or that's only half the story, whatever you might want to say, just let me know in the comments, and we'll have a discussion about it. So without further ado, I'm going to get into it here. The first thing I was doing, or what I was just working on, was, so this budget reconciliation, $3.5 trillion over 10 years. So what I'm trying to do is just find some comparisons for budget, right? Because we're really stuck on this number right here, $3.5 trillion. Let me zoom in on this so you guys can see it a little bit better. We're stuck on this $3.5 trillion number, but it's $3.5 trillion over 10 years. $3.5 trillion over 10 years means $350 billion per year, right? So, okay, we're going to spend $350 billion a year. That's what this budget is calling for. Here's the thing. We spent $3.4 trillion on COVID this year, just this year, okay? Not over 10 years, 3.4 trillion this year, just on COVID. In fiscal year 21, this year, we spent $1 trillion on the military, which means over the next 10 years, we're going to be spending $10 trillion on the military, just the military, period. Not VA, not DOD, military, $10 trillion over 10 years. That's what we spend just on the military. So we've got the whole government, we've got education, we've got the State Department, we've got the Department of Defense, we've got um, Social Security, all these safety nets, right? So where's the money being allocated? So the military is just one of those things, right? So the military, one department, $10 trillion over 10 years is what we put into the military. So this budget reconciliation bill, $3.5 trillion over 10 years, is only $350 billion a year. So we spend like 3 times the amount of money on the military per year than we would on what we're going to get out of this bill. Well, what are we going to get out of this bill? And I put this together in a different episode. They say child poverty will be cut in half because of the expanded child tax credit. Medicare is going to cover dental, vision, and hearing. They're going to lower the Medicare eligibility age to 60. Health premiums will not be allowed to exceed 8.5% of your salary. There'll be a hard cap on your health care premiums, which means if you're currently spending 15% of your salary on your health care, that's going to go away. Only 8.5%. That's in this $3.5 trillion deal. They're not going to raise taxes on households over $400,000, but they are going to raise taxes on people who are more wealthy than that and corporations. And this bill also includes funding for a massive improvement in green energy and stricter goals for climate. I believe they want a bunch of reduction, 50% reduction by 2030, I think is the latest I've heard. They're going to call for a tax on imports from polluting countries like China, so forth. But the other thing I noted the last time we talked about this is that American families pay about $6,000 per year into corporate subsidies, okay? So Walmart alone receives nearly $8 billion a year from taxpayers, and they don't pay any taxes. So we're paying them $8 billion to be a business, and they're not giving anything back to the American people. So when you think about $350 billion a year, it's a third of what we spend on the military. We give billions of dollars to corporations every year. So why are we having this battle over this $3.5 trillion price tag? That shouldn't matter. $3.5 trillion is over 1 year is way different than $3.5 trillion over 10 years. We spent $3.4 trillion on COVID in the last year and a half. Okay, that's a crisis, but we spend all of that money in 1 year. We're talking about $3.5 trillion over 10 and everything we get for it. So what I was trying to do is just kind of narrow down or get a little bit more specific as to what we're going to get out of the bill to see what the value to spending ratio would be. But before I did that, I was checking out this website. This is usaspending.gov, and it's kind of cool. I haven't been on here before, but essentially it breaks out the spending for the government each year, right? So if we go into fiscal year 2021, the obligated amount of spending for this year is $9.2 trillion. Now remember, the Biden plan is 3.5. And I talked about this in another episode too. Trump's budgets all exceeded $4 trillion and we didn't hear anything about it. Okay? But because we've got to split Congress and because Joe Manchin is an idiot, we're hearing more about the budget because it's now in question how much is going to be passed, what we're going to spend it on, who's going to vote for it. So obviously, these numbers are inflated because of COVID, right? But it's kind of cool because if you look at the spending, okay, 14.4% went to income security, but that's going to be a lot of the COVID spending. Medicare, 13.4%, Social Security, National Defense, all right here. That's 2021, and we need to look at 2021 with a grain of salt because we spent so much money on COVID. We spent $3.4 trillion on COVID, which would put our regular spending at like 5.8 trillion would have been what we spent if COVID didn't exist. Okay. So what I was doing was going back to 2019. Look at 2019. So here we are, 2019 spending by budget function. So we've got Medicare, 17%. Huge difference, right? So for these blocks, we've got Medicare, Social Security, National Defense is our biggest spenders in 2019. But in 21, we've got 4 blocks. We've got Medicare, Income Security, Social Security, and National Defense. Income security jumped way up in 2021 because we were giving that money for COVID relief. That is usually a smaller number. So if we go back to 19, we can see income security is all the way over here. Spent way less on it. We spend most of our money on Social Security, National Defense, and Medicare. That's where most of our spending goes. And in that typical year, 2019, we spent $6.6 trillion. 6.6. Now, I had said that Trump's budgets all exceeded $4 trillion. There's discretionary spending, there's obligated spending. This is obligated spending, but the Trump budgets that were proposed were all over $4 trillion. So Republicans spend a lot of money. And now I will say the Democrats wanted to spend $6 trillion on this, which is more than the Republicans would spend. And Democrats typically spend to get a little bit more back. You have to spend money to make money. I think that's the mentality with the Democrats. Republicans, more conservative, don't spend as much money, but they still approved $4 trillion budgets 3 years in a row. So again, we're talking about 3.5 trillion down from 6 trillion. That's what we're talking about in this bill. So I was just trying to see, where are we spending the government money, and how will things be moving around, and how does the $3.5 trillion budget compare to other years? Well, we know that a lot of what's in the $3.5 trillion plan is education in the form of pre-K and free community college. So in 2019, we only spent 2.3% of our budget on education. This number will go up quite a bit. We've got the child tax credit. You've also got things like free childcare or discounted childcare. So that's going to go into one of these categories here. Let's see where we'd put it. Education, training, social services probably go in there as well, if I had to take a guess. So we'd see an expansion in education. We'd see an expansion in probably health and Medicare, because we're going to reduce the eligibility age. We're also going to negotiate drug prices, which is in the bill. And I think this is one of the things that Joe Manchin is caught up on, because Joe Manchin gets a lot of money from the healthcare industry, and passing this bill is something that the healthcare industry does not want to happen, because Americans spend more on drugs than any other country. So it would be bad if we could negotiate our drug prices for our government Medicare, because so many people are on it. And if all those people are paying less money, then the healthcare companies are going to lose out. And this is why I need to talk about this in the podcast in a better way, more put together. So that's just kind of what I was looking for. So what I'm doing right now is I want to know what's in this $3.5 trillion bill. So what is in the Democratic spending bill? I thought I had this open already, actually. All right, so we'll check out this CNN article. I kind of bounce around to different sources. So 3.5 trillion. Bills get to be written. That's part of the problem too. We don't know all the specifics, which is a concern, but we're trying to get the number, and we're trying to get the bulk of the programs narrowed down. A memorandum to Democratic senators sent Monday specifies that new taxes on families making less than $400,000 a year would be prohibited, which means taxes will not go up, it is not allowed to go up if you make less than $400,000 a year in your household. Can't happen. So this is truly, it's going to work out to a tax break for the middle class, but at a minimum, it is not allowed to further tax the middle class. And I would say upper middle class. $400,000 a year for a household is a lot of money. The resolution calls for multiple measures that would contain in the family's plan proposal. I mentioned that earlier. It's brought in, so I'll leave that out in my notes here. $200 billion in universal preschool for 3 and 4-year-olds would save the average family about $13,000 when implemented. Universal pre-K for 3 to 4-year-olds. Save the average family about, did I say $3,000 per year? Type that in there. Then I like to pair up my sources. So if I use anything, I just, for my show notes, I throw down, did I copy it? Throw the source in there so that everyone can see where I'm getting from stuff later. So okay, so it's a lot of money, right? It's $3.5 trillion. So to say it's all going to be spent in vain is too broad. So I'd be interested to know like what money do you think is going to be spent in vain and on what? You know, where what programs do you think we shouldn't be spending money on, and you know, maybe for those programs, how much do you think should be spent? If they're saying that we're going to spend 200 billion on universal preschool, do you agree with that 200 billion dollar number, or would you like to see it higher for universal pre-K but like maybe lower for healthcare, or would you like to see this go away entirely? I'd be interested to know that. Okay, so we've got a cap on childcare here too. Under Biden's proposal, low and middle income households would pay no more than 7% of their income on childcare for kids younger than 5. That's a pretty big. It's kind of interesting how they're breaking that down, because we're seeing the caps, right? We get this: healthcare premiums cannot be more than 8.5% of your salary, and that the low and middle income households can pay no more than 7% of their income on childcare. Okay, so you're talking about things like food stamps and social welfare programs and stuff like that. You think we should have reform, and we should limit what people can buy with their federal funded like food stamps and social service money. We want that spent more responsibly, if I'm understanding correctly. No, no, that's okay. That's a weird sentence. All right. This line is vague. The president also wants to invest more in the child care workforce to bring their wages up to $15 an hour. Okay, he wants to. Is that in the bill? That doesn't, is that a policy, or is that just something he wants? I don't. So if we're looking at, I'm going to go back to fiscal year 2019, um, because I think that's a more accurate picture than 21. But so what you're talking about would fall into the income security category here, which is 8.6% of the budget. So it's not small. I mean, 10% of 6.6 trillion, we're $660 billion toward income security. And if we click into that, it'll kind of give us a further breakdown if the connection wants to work. Actually thought it was less than 10%, so I'm surprised it's that high. I thought it was sub 5 for some reason. Did I ever click into fiscal year 19 income security? All right, we'll let that run. Just to see how the income security is kind of spread out. But you mentioned some other problems, so I'm interested to know the other problems too. Because I'm a progressive, but I'm interested in hearing what other people on the other side have to say, because I think there are valid concerns, and I think if we have productive conversation about it rather than screaming at each other, we can at least maybe like the American people can get somewhere if even Congress can't. Maybe we can elect better people. So I'm definitely interested, like outside of the income security, like what other areas are you interested in or are concerned about, right? So here's income security. So housing assistance, 11%, general retirement and disability insurance. Okay, so let's do this. So $95.7 billion to food and nutritional assistance. So calculator. So I'd say 660 billion. So 660, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And we're going to, no, we did that backwards. 95.7 billion. Okay, so 95.7, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So 95.7 billion. We're going to divide that by the 660 billion. And that's going to give us 1.45%. Okay, that's the number I was thinking of. So 1.5% of the total budget goes to food and nutritional assistance out of the entire budget. So we've got income security, which makes up a larger portion, but a lot of that is federal employment, retirement and disability, unemployment. That's probably about 2%. So food and nutrition plus unemployment is probably about 2% of the total budget. Not small, because we're talking 200 billion, 100 billion. So a lot of money. They definitely contributed to destroying the country. Yeah. I think we throw money at a lot of things. I talked to I've got a friend who comments on the podcast Facebook page a lot, the New Deal Facebook page, and even he agrees that maybe we spend too much on military and that we need things on we need to reform spending on things like military and some of the other large programs. And I would say I'm for the social programs, but he says we need to reform the social programs as well. And I would say if we can prove misuse in these programs, or like you said, we want to restrict what people can buy with that money, I would be open to that. If we're going to save money on the military, why not save money here in income security too, if it's being misused? Is there an area you think that we should be throwing money at? Or what would you propose as an alternate solution outside of funding? Yeah, Walmart brought their pay to 15. A lot of the big companies have gone up to 15. Not all, but most. I think the small businesses are lagging behind a little bit. For better or for worse. Where were we here? 2-year tuition free, 75% of the average tuition costs in each state. Is that in there? Universal pre-K. All right. And then we're going to do free 2-year tuition. Increase the Pell Grant I saw in there. $12 weeks of paid parental leave by the 10th year of the program. Okay, so not right away. 12 weeks paid parental leave by end of the 10th year. In first world countries, people know how to optimize the use of their resources, and here people are told to maximize the waste of it. When you say people, I mean, you might mean both, but do you mean your average citizens like you and I, or do you mean the government? And in those first world countries, how do you define optimized? What are they doing that shows that they're optimizing the way they're spending money as compared to the U.S.? Expand the child tax credit. 3,600. Expand federal health program. I get that already. Subsidies. Already talked about it. Lowering price of prescription drugs. I think I have that in there. That's not in. Lower price of prescription drugs. See, this language right here, and I know this is an article, so I know it's not the language of the bill, right? But it's talking about what's in the bill. And it says, in addition, it calls for promoting health equity, particularly investing in maternal, behavioral, and racial justice health measures. Health equity has been one of the priorities of the administration. Okay, it's a priority of the administration, but I have no clue what that money is going to go to. I mean, I understand what health equity is, but like, how are you spending that money? Where is that money going? Who's getting that money? This is the kind of stuff I would want to know about the bill. So I've been really interested in European culture, and I've read a lot of articles about, I think, uh, Finland. Sometimes Norway is mentioned in there. It seems like every European country has a way of doing things that is better than here, some more than others. I know that Spain had a lot of success with their uh, drug policy. They're decriminalizing all drugs and doing that kind of thing. I believe Finland's education is really good. I think their happiness is really high. I'm not sure how much of that is linked to spending. What about their government or culture makes them spend more responsibly as a whole? What is it about the Europeans? Like, what is the mindset that makes them more responsible with their money? And what do you mean by that? Are they putting more toward retirement? Are they just spending on less? Are they less materialistic? Are you considering materialism to be irresponsible? Or are you saying like, hey, you've got X amount of money, you need to fix your house, but instead you do something stupid with it, like I don't know, buy a Corvette, you know? 80% of power emission free before 2030. 80% power tuition free by 2030. More infrastructure. Okay, I mean that was a decent rundown. NPR. Oh, cool. This is the budget, right? Okay. All right, we got a breakdown here. So copy that, throw that over. That's just a whole note. Grab the article. Space. Where's my bullet? Is that it? That makes sense. High trust societies. So European countries are more responsible, and part of the reason they're more responsible is because they have more faith in their government, and part of the reason they have more faith in their government is because the government is more responsible with their spending and their tax dollars. So because there's high trust, the money is generally spent better from the top down. You almost get a trickle down effect with responsibility. Would that be a fair argument? Is that what you're saying? Because that would make sense to me. Um, I know that is America the only country to do like this tax refund, like the tax refund process, where it's like, oh, give X amount of money and then you get some back. Because I think in European countries, you know exactly what you pay it. That's it. There's no refund. I think some countries give an itemized list of the exact dollar amounts of where taxes are going. Transportation, healthcare, whatever it may be. I think Americans would really like that. A little transparency. That would go a long way to, promoting trust in American culture. 726 billion for health, labor, education, and pensions. 107 billion for the judiciary. To address lawful permanent status. I think that got cut. I think that's what the parliamentarian took out. When is this article from? Yeah, okay, so the parliamentarian took that out. That is no longer in the bill. That's still only about 2.1. 1.1 trillion. Let's grab another one. Yahoo, no. Wall Street Journal has a pay gate. That's older. All right, let's see what CBS has for us. Ten-year Build Back Better Act. The names, they keep on throwing these names around. Okay, so we're going to call this the 10-year Build Back Better Act. Wrong article. CBS, yeah. Extended child tax credit, we knew that. We knew that. Paid family, we knew that. Climate change, we knew that. The massive bill has a slew of lesser-known provisions as well. Okay, cool. $5 million a year for small business administration for an entrepreneur. $5 million. Bill also directs 2.5. $5 million seems so small for an entrepreneurial program. Oh, for formerly incarcerated individuals. The fine print is important. Okay, that's a very specific subgroup. Okay, that makes sense. Bill also directs $2.5 billion from the Justice Department to award competitive grants or contracts to local governments, community-based organizations, and other groups to support intervention strategies to reduce community violence. Okay, so crime. I'm so mad about the tax increase because they aren't going far enough. We're not even returning to like pre-Trump. I mean, if they can get the revenue for it or from it without going that high, I guess. Anyway, it's kind of a catch-22. High culture produces people who are better at. Yep. It's not just the trust of government, but overall behavior in respect of the law and privacy of other people. Do you, unless we have full transparency, we can't know. Right. Okay. A lot of boomers and beyond, I think even people, so I'm 33. I'm 33. So a lot of people my age even seem to have this idea that America used to be like what you were talking about. People who are better adapted to live in a modern civilization, behavior in respect of the law and privacy. Do you think America used to be like that and has gotten away from it? Or do you think we were never like that and we have been disillusioned and we've been passed by the European countries? Or do you think we've abandoned that? So at one point, maybe we're moving together with the European countries and then we just went the other way? I mean, we really should have full transparency, right? Is that too much to ask? Like, got it. Okay. Joint Committee on Taxation estimates the tax changes spearheaded would raise more than $2 trillion in revenue over 10 years, with roughly $1 trillion in tax increases and $1 trillion from. So we're coming up $1 trillion short on the revenue, which is why I think the taxes need to be higher. So that's just my personal opinion. Okay. Then this is going to be how they pay for it. they lived life on easy mode and still didn't have the basic decency to make life. Um, if you don't mind me asking, if you, how old are you, or if you want to give like an age range. Um, so I'm considered a millennial. I'm in the, I guess, early to mid millennial is what I would be considered, and I agree heavily with that statement. Um, our parents, at least my parents, sorry, they grew up in a time. So you had Vietnam in the 60s, 70s, Korea in the 50s. So my parents were born in the 50s, and then you get this stretch where the country's doing relatively well economically, at least through the 70s. Economy's good, jobs are good, and I think I agree. I feel like there's the people the baby boomer generation. I think you can say grew up in one of the easiest periods in American history. You had Vietnam and you had that, but that's only a very small fraction of their life, and everything else they've done, like you said earlier, has sent us the other way. And now we're inheriting that, or millennials are. Again, I don't know how old you are. You might be younger than me, older than me, but I can relate to the sentiment because my generation will be the first generation that, on average, won't make more than their parents. Um, yeah, right. And I guess you could say maybe that was taken for granted. Maybe they just assumed that if they did the things that they did. But it could have been a sense of entitlement too. A lot of the policies, a lot of the lack of transparency, a lot of that stems from, I think, greed or a sense of putting, oneself above the better, the community or the people around you. And when that happens, you get the income gap, you get the wage gap, and things along those lines. Okay, you're younger. But yeah, I mean, I think if you if if you live a comfortable life, like the bulk of that generation did comparatively, I think you're more inclined to just want more. And I think you have a different mindset. I think adversity springs upon generations a sense of kind of unity and kind of a looking out for each other. I mean, when you think about America going into World War One, World War Two, those are full scale wars where the whole country had to come together, rationing, women going to work to help the war effort. There's a sense of unity there, and I think that kind of breeds what you're talking about, that sense of responsibility, but also respect for other people and maybe the privacy of other people in the long run. Take a generation, give them no adversity, and I think it opens the door for them to think about themselves first, which leads to things like greed or at least disrespect of other people, not caring so much about how your actions affect them, even inadvertently. I do something and it hurts someone. I don't know their name. I just know it's going to, disproportionately affect, this group of people, but I don't know them. So, whatever. I think, I think that type of thing might be bred by that lack of adversity and that lack of unity. And then depending on how old you are, at a minimum, you were likely alive, 2008, we had the crash, no jobs, the economy's sunk. I went through 9/11. We've had, the student loan crisis has bogged down a generation. Now we've had a second crash and COVID. Yeah, the lack of empathy. And I think I worry because a lot of people my age, I think, have inherited that same mindset. And I want to think that my generation will be better because we have gone through, 9/11, multiple economic crashes, and things like the student loan crisis, and now COVID. And I'm only 33, but I have friends and people my age who very much take on the boomer mentality. And despite everything, despite the adversity that we've gone through as a whole, that doesn't seem to have had an impact on their empathy for other people. And I think what we're seeing in the division with the country is people who are empathetic, people who can put themselves in other people's shoes, and people who can't. And I hate to break it down like that. That's really vague. But I think a lot of our issues come down to morality now. And when we're talking about things like human decency, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about morality. And so I don't know how we fix that. How do you fix how people think about one another without, I would say, some type of grand event? But here we are, right, with COVID, and that hasn't happened. We've seen further divide. I would hope that there is, but I understand why people would feel that way. Definitely. I mean, there's not a lot of things happening, at least in America, that give you faith that we're even headed in the right direction toward the better future. And I hear that. That makes sense to me. All right, I think we got enough there. And I wanted to talk about minority control. And we have Republicans in minority control. And then we have Manchin and Cinema are minority control. And then I think I had numbers up above. Oop. Where are we here? I don't know if I understand the conquering bit. I don't know. I sometimes wonder, I might be naive, but I sometimes wonder if humanity might hopefully be beyond those kind of wide scale wars with the technology we have. And I like to think that globally we have more respect for human life, but I don't know what, how people think in China or Russia. I only, have the American mindset, unfortunately. And so I like to think that the world is more progressed in that way, and that maybe things like conquering don't happen anymore. I think we're headed toward globalism. Maybe you need some conquering before globalism. I'm not sure. I guess in my mind, I just thought the boundaries would kind of erase themselves over time, but that's not how we've done it. So, I mean, you might be right. Conquered by who and why? $50-50 in the Senate? Yeah. So 48 Democrats support the bill, and that's the total. 220 Democrats plus 48 is 268 Democrats. 2 Democrats disagree, and that's going to sink the bill. Okay, that's where I was going there. We've got the filibuster. We have the judiciary. We have stonewalling. know if I need. I mean, I might just be able to talk about that. I don't know if I need too much data. I got that data there. I think that shows that. I think I've got enough knowledge. China and Russia are creeping and waiting for the right moment to go full in. They don't value human life, so they will sacrifice as many of their billions of people they have. They do have billions. I think I read something interesting a while ago because we've always talked about Russia as a military superpower. And then I realized like their economy is only like 10% of what the US economy is. And their military spending is nowhere near what, I mean, no one's is, but Russia's especially, their military spending is nowhere near what America's is. And that made me wonder like how strong as much as Russia's military really? They don't have, do they have about as many people as America? Population of Russia. Okay, so they have less than half the population of America. They spend less on military. Their economy is only 10%. So I guess I wonder, like, why is Russia a threat when they're so, for all intents and purposes, small? You know, I mean, there's 1 billion people in China. You know, I mean, I get that. And their economy is, you know, challenges our own. So I think I can understand China, unless we're talking about China and Russia as an alliance and not as individual entities, which maybe I could understand. I haven't looked into this at all. I just heard that a while back and thought, like, if that's true about Russia, then why are we so afraid of Russia? Other than, I mean, they have nukes, yeah, but. All right, I got you there. That makes sense. Infrastructure bill is 1.2 trillion. And I had my other notes here. So where's infrastructure plan? Oh, the user fees. We need to give the background. Okay, so we're going to give background. We're going to talk about so we've got two bills. We've got infrastructure. We've got spending. All in favor of infrastructure, including Republicans. Progressives. Progressives feel strongly about the spending bill. Already came down from 6 trillion. Moderates aren't on board. Progressives believe that if we pass infrastructure, moderates will not vote for the budget. Okay. Detail the infrastructure bill, detail the spending bill, 10-year Build Back Better Act, 3.5 trillion over 10. We've got our comparisons here. Got our source. Talked about that earlier, but I'll leave it. actually the child tax credit. All right, so we got universal pre-K. I thought I had one more medical thing that I threw in a weird spot. That's a small breakdown. I'll leave that there. This is our corporate subsidies. Then we get the user fees up top. Those are, yep, okay, those are both related. I think maybe I'll just stick to that since that's relevant for now. Usually I do like an hour episode. I throw some clips in there and stuff too. Oh, we can look for clips, I guess. Oh. I want to talk about the resolution. I mean, I guess I need to make an argument, right? I mean, here's all the facts, but what's my argument? Minority control. It's a little bit there. All right, I'll gripe about that, and then I'll do resolution. All right, so I think it was David Gergen on CNN mentioned reducing term of plan to 5 years, and keeping everything, to reduce spending. Democrats have floated $2.1 trillion bill. Manchin says he is firm on 1.5 trillion dollar bill. Let's look for clips. If anyone watching has any clips that people talking about this budget deal, the reconciliation bill, the infrastructure bill, key players Pelosi, Schumer, I don't know, McCarthy, McConnell, AOC, any of the progressive leaders in the House, any clips from any of the people that you heard, either let me know in the comments and I'll look for it, or shoot me a link. YouTube. Pardon my Nightwish videos. I like them. So, Manchin on $3.5 trillion bill. I'm going to put my headphones on just so that you guys don't have to hear my speakers. You'll hear the audio, you just won't hear it through my speakers. And I think that was just this week. I think he just $19 hours ago. Yeah, we know he's wrong, Chris Hayes. Is it really not just like a clip of Manchin speaks on spending bill this week? That looks right.
With the timeless protection of ADT, it's safe to say,
hey Google, unlock the front door.
when you've helped save more lives than any other home
Turn up
security
the volume
brand,
for the clip
it's
a little
safe
bit.
to say.
Skip the ad.
All right, taking you to Joe Manchin, speaking to reporters on Capitol Hill right now, the man of the hour right now, not only for his comments that this whole package, the human infrastructure packages, are more like 1.5
at all. Will you still stick with 1.5 trillion?
I've been very upfront and very fair. And the bottom line is 1.5 for this infrastructure. I mean, for not the infrastructure, but for the reconciliation bill. You got 1.1 or 1.2 on the infrastructure bill, and you have another 250 billion for the USICA bill. There's an awful lot, and we already spent 5.4.
But you could get zero. Are you willing to take zero?
Well, that's up to them. They're going to be there, not me.
Are you going to ask that natural gas be part of the clean energy program without carbon capture? Is that your position that you're going to push in these talks?
Natural gas to be what now?
Natural gas to be part of the clean energy component?
It has to be. You know, on the energy, I'm all for all the above. I'm all for clean energy, but I'm also for producing the amount of energy that we need to make sure that we have reliability, and I'm concerned about that.
Without carbon capture, correct?
Well, I'd love to have carbon capture. We don't have the technology because we really haven't gotten to that point, and it's so darn expensive that it makes it almost improbable to do. Hold on. So basically, what we're trying to do is find a passageway forward. I am just not forgiving public companies who have shareholders, public dollars, free, when I know they're going to be very profitable at the end, whatever we do. All I'm asking for, can't we put ourselves in a position, we might front you the money with low interest loans, but shouldn't we get it back when the profits start flowing so that we don't have to incur more debt? That's all.
Senator, how do you get there? You know that Senator Sanders and others have this 3.5 number. Have you had any conversations with anybody about how you bridge the gap between 3.5? What would you take out? Are those conversations happening between you and anyone else?
Not at this time. They haven't. I mean, people pretty much know where I've been all along. And I've just said this. If you had X amount of dollars in your paycheck and you wanted to buy something, and that what you wanted to buy was not affordable right now, you'd save up and buy it later. That's all I'm saying. So what's our priorities? Children, pre-K. I'm strong on pre-K. Child care, child tax credits, we can do that, but do that in a compassionate way, targeted. You have basically the median income is $68,000 in America. Can't we use targeted? You have 90 million people that they file tax returns for $50,000 or less. That's targeted. I don't think a person that's making $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 are in as much need as a person on the lower end. If you have X amount, who do you help? That's all I'm saying.
Does the president need to take more of a leadership role here? I mean, we've
President,
senator by senator. How does it all come together?
I've had great conversations, and the president, I admire the president. I really do. And sometimes we have a different...
I'll keep that there. He said something interesting at the beginning. I'll duplicate. And we'll pause. But I think I'm more interested in what he said at the beginning, and I think we missed it.
He said that they need by tomorrow legislative language.
What's your expectation in the House? What's your message to progressives who worry that this isn't going to come together?
It's got to come together. We have a real good piece of legislation. It's over in the House right now. We really have two good pieces of legislation. An infrastructure bill is so desperately needed all over our country. We all worked on that. It came out of here bipartisan. We have a USICA bill over there turning $50 billion that would really help us compete with China and not let them get ahead of us. Those are two
A very unpredictable night in Washington.
I always wonder,
Democrats continuing their clash
in the age of
over
technology,
the
how we
Biden
don't
spending plan, and I've got a lot of news for you. Let me get right to it. Speaker.
0.5, as you've seen, I think. I brought the 1.5, as you've seen, I think, by now. The 1.5 was always done from my heart. I've never been a liberal in any way, shape, or the form. And I have voted pretty consistently all my whole life. And all they need to do is we have to elect more, I guess, for them to get theirs, elect more liberals.
Elect more liberals. He's not a liberal.
Doesn't really do it for me. I see the clips on TV all day, and then I can't find them here. It's really really annoying.
We begin the hour, though, with a defining test for a struggling president and his anxious party. The pieces are complicated. The stakes, though, quite simple. Strike a deal in 24 to 36 hours, or watch the ambitious Democratic agenda on child care, community college, climate change, health care, infrastructure, and more implode. The president scrapped a planned trip to Chicago
2 seconds of
stay here
clip.
in Washington to keep negotiating with two centrist senators
9 minutes,
who say
58 seconds of
House liberals
commentary.
want the government to spend.
All right, I guess we're going with Fox News.
Rubber rectangle is weird because it's our #1 solar gadget, and it could save.
All right, taking you to Joe Manchin, speaking to reporters on Capitol Hill right now, the man of the hour right now, infrastructure package is the definition of fiscal insanity. But now, breaking some news here that he thinks that package has to be a lot smaller, more like $1.5 trillion. Let's just say that progressives are not keen on that. Joe Manchin right now.
If that means no infrastructure bill at all, will you still stick with $1.5 trillion?
I've been very upfront and very fair. The bottom line is 1.5 for this infrastructure, for not the infrastructure, but for the reconciliation bill. You got 1.1 or 1.2 on the infrastructure bill, and you have another $250 billion for the USICA bill. There's an awful lot, and we already spent 5.4.
But you could get zero. Are you willing to take zero?
Well, that's up to them. They're going to be there, not me.
Are you going to ask that natural gas be part of the clean energy program without carbon capture? Is that your position? That you're
Just opening up Adobe Audition.
Natural gas will be part of the clean energy component.
It has to be. On the energy, I am all for all the above. I'm all for clean energy, but I'm also for producing the amount of energy that we need to make sure that we have reliability.
Episode 18.
I'm concerned about that.
Without carbon capture, correct?
Well, I'd love to have carbon capture. We don't have the technology because we really haven't gotten to that point. And it's so darn expensive that it makes it almost improbable to do. Hold on. So basically what we're trying to do is find a passageway forward. I am just not for giving public companies who have shareholders public dollars free when I know they're going to be very
Or more like $1.5 trillion. Let's just say that progressives are not keen on that. Joe Manchin.
All right, I'll hold that there. Come back for that later. I know Pelosi.
You're a small business owner? You need insurance. Next saves you up to 30%.
Nancy Pelosi is in a pickle. She had promised that there would be a vote yesterday on this $1
First she said there'd be a vote on Monday. Then she said yesterday.
Well, she promised moderates it would be by.
Let me change. I'm willing to come from 0 to 1.5.
For 1 year? I mean, here's the thing, is that there's a lot of games being played with this number. Let's be really clear about what the current status is with $3.5 trillion. That's $350 billion per year. So if this is really about the deficit, then maybe we go after our defense spending and find our savings there instead of going after people's child care.
Yeah, that's where they want to go. They would love to cut the Defense Department lock, stock, and barrel if they.
Yes. Yes, we would. Yeah, I saw that. Is it Jayapal? It's an A. Okay, sorry about that. I thought she was on TV earlier. She's really good.
We begin the readout tonight, waiting, as you just heard, to see if Speaker Pelosi will bring the bipartisan infrastructure bill to the House floor for a vote tonight, which per her history, Pelosi would likely only do if it will pass. Right now, members are bracing for a late night with no vote scheduled before 9 p.m. But top aides to the president, Speaker Pelosi, and Majority Leader Chuck. With me now, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal of Washington, chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. I have to say, Congresswoman, what has perplexed me the most about this fight is that having, been around Democrats and, been a Democrat and sort of observed Democrats in the wild for a really long time, my presumption always was that I understood what Democrats were for in general. I want to put back up what's in the Build Back Better proposal, because I think what Nancy Pelosi said today about this being the culmination of basically why she's a Democrat, this is over 10 years, paid family leave, universal pre-K, free community college expansion. When you combine that with what's in the other bill, meaning the roads and bridges, the high-speed internet, et cetera, the two of those things together strike me as what Democrats are generally always for. Number one, why were the bills split up in the first place? And do you now think it was a mistake Because the combined sum of those two things is what I thought Democrats were about.
Yeah, Joy, it's so great to see you. And yes, we were
together.
not for splitting up the bill in the first place. In fact, we told everyone we knew that that was a bad idea, because what we didn't want to do is pit roads and bridges against childcare, against paid leave, against free community college. And when the decision was made to split the two bills, what we said in the Progressive Caucus, and we're a 96-member strong Progressive Caucus, we said that a majority of our members would not vote for the infrastructure bill, a much smaller bill. And while it has some good things, Joy, I would just say that, there are a lot of people who feel like the climate provisions in particular are actually negative, net negative in terms of carbon emissions if you just had that bill. And so what we're trying to do with the reconciliation bill is make sure that's the Build Back Better Act that has all of the rest of it. That's 85% of the president's agenda in the Build Back Better Act. And so we've said we will not vote for the bipartisan infrastructure bill until we have a vote in the Senate on the reconciliation bill, because that is absolutely crucial. And we are not going to leave behind women and families who desperately need childcare and paid leave, people who need community college in order to be able to get those jobs in the infrastructure package. We're not going to leave behind climate change. And while the infrastructure bill has a little bit of money for water, the reality is the vast majority of getting lead out of water, you mentioned Flint, is actually in the Build Back Better Act. So that is why we've been so firm about it. And, our members have been amazing. They are not going to leave anybody behind. And we're going to deliver the entirety of President Biden's agenda to his desk. This isn't a liberal wish list of, things that we wish we could have that nobody agrees with us on. 96% of Democrats in the House and the Senate and the President of the United States campaigned on this agenda and now want to deliver it.
And what's interesting is that Sinema and Manchin initially voted on the framework. They were saying they were for reconciliation. The thing that is confusing about it is it does feel like a bait and switch to those who are looking from the outside looking in. Right. Like they managed to split it so that they could take out everything that, as you said, it's not liberal or progressive. Joe Biden is a moderate. Like Joe Biden is a norm core Democrat if I've ever seen one. That's why he brought the protest that's happening out there. This is USA Today. So there are people who are protesting on the Golden Gate Bridge right now because one of the other things that's been thrown over the bridge is immigration reform. Like it seems like things that are sort of core to what Democrats have been saying they want to do for a long time are getting thrown under the bus. The White House reportedly is on you guys' side, on the Progressive Caucus's side. Have they signaled to you that they are on your side all the way to the point of if you got to vote against that infrastructure bill, they're good with it?
Well, they understand exactly where we are. We have been transparent. I talk to the White House regularly. I talk to them today. I talk to the
just trying to get some
regularly.
clips for the podcast at this point.
And they know
I haven't heard
we
this.
are actually the ones who have the president's back. And I know that they have been very complimentary about that, and also about the fact that we're talking about what's in the Build Back Better agenda. I so appreciate that you put up that chart, because while people will remember a road or a bridge, and those are important, Joy, I'm not saying they're not.
For sure.
I need them in my district, but what people will really remember is when they wake up in the morning and they now can afford childcare. They now have paid family and medical leave. They now can send their kids to community college or trade school. They now have dental, vision, and hearing for their Medicare benefits. They now have a real chance.
This is the kind of clip that I like to include in the podcast. I mean, I know that she's biased in her opinion here, but at the beginning, Representative Jayapal explained why the progressives are doing what they're doing and why the moderates are doing what they're doing. And I think it's really important. I think a lot of what we lack on the internet for media, Facebook especially, but wherever we get our news, is that you don't get this, right? And I'm not sure how many people are tuned in to this type of clip, or how many people are just reading headlines on Facebook. I don't know how many people are deep diving into the media, when they're trying to look for this stuff. But clips like this are important, even if you're not a progressive, even if you don't approve of the $3.5 trillion spending bill. you have a U.S. representative explaining very clearly, here's what's going on, here's why it's happening, here's what happened before that led to this situation, and here's our path forward. And I think when you have a video clip of someone calmly and eloquently explaining the situation and their position, I feel like even if you disagree with what she's saying, even if you're the most conservative of Republicans, you understand what she's saying. You understand where she's coming from. You understand why it's happening the way it's happening. And you understand the motivating factors. What's motivating this? Well, they want childcare. They want the child tax credit. They want to, give relief to the middle class so that they can wake up in the morning and feel like they can afford childcare. Okay, that's the motivating factor behind why they want to pass this bill. You can disagree with it, but it's clear, it's concise, and it's well put. If you're scrolling through Facebook, you're not seeing this. You're not getting that quality. And so sorry, spaced out there for a minute, but I like listening to clips. When I'm putting together the podcast episode and I'm listening for clips to put together, a lot of my time is sunk into that because I just watched the whole thing. So I think there's two portions I would use out of this in the podcast. And that's the first part where she's explaining, well, they were one bill. We split them into two bills. And since that happened, we feel like we can't trust the moderates to, pass this $3.5 trillion bill that we feel has 85% of the president's agenda in it. Good. And then toward the end there, where she's just emphasizing why she's doing it for the child care, how she wants people to feel. It's kind of a human moment. I think that's something that in my podcast, at least, I like to throw out there and kind of show the human side, because if you're new to the New Deal, if you haven't seen any of my videos, listen to the podcast, the tagline is compassionate politics. And even though I'm a progressive, I'm not closed to hearing differing opinions. I like to know where conservatives are coming from. I believe that there's common ground there, but I think the focus with politics on both sides should always be, how does this affect or help people? I feel like that should be our guiding principle. Everything that we pass, every piece of legislation that we pass, everything that we do should be working toward the benefit of the people. If it's not benefiting people, if it's hurting people, if it's disenfranchising people, we shouldn't do it, right? You wouldn't do something, you wouldn't put a policy in place, in your local community or even in your own household that hurt other people. Unless you're a special kind of psychopath, they're out there, they exist. But if we operate off a moral baseline, and I feel like a lot of people do on both sides, I feel like then you find common ground. So I think it's important to find those human moments. Why are you doing this? Well, because we want our constituents to wake up in the morning and afford childcare, which means less stress for them, which means better family dynamics, more wealth stays in the household to provide better lifestyle for the family and the children, or maybe go toward education. Oh, by the way, the first 2 years of college are free as well. So now you only need to put that money toward the last 2 years of college, and it snowballs, and it can have a, extremely beneficial effect. So I think that's why I want to include those clips. Because this is a shorter episode, I might just include a little bit of the Manchin clip here, sticking with $1.5 trillion. Maybe some of that at the end. I'm not a liberal, just to kind of drive home the point. And then, contrast it with Jayapal here with the explanation of the situation probably up front. And then I'll probably sandwich, Manchin between the first part of this clip, the second part of this clip, and use that as a kind of jumping board. So I'm going to copy these clips over to my worksheet. We're going to do the chip, and that's Jayapal, right? Oop. Chip. Okay, and those will be my clips. So I'm probably going to wrap this up here in a second because I think I've gotten through most of the research on this. I'm kind of spread out all over the place, so the episode's going to be on the infrastructure bill and the spending bill and kind of the dynamic around it and my personal feelings on it, of course, and kind of these facts here. But, just in the reason I also want to do this, and I think I'll do this in the future as well, is because I want to show people how easy it is to get accurate information. I mean, we can cross-reference most of this information that I found with other websites of reputable sources that have been vetted and, have gone through some type of journalistic integrity process, and you can get the facts. And then you can disagree with the facts if you want to. But I've been streaming an hour and 15 minutes. I probably spent 55 of those minutes doing research. And then the other portion talking, but okay, we can provide background on the situation, right? We just saw the clip. What's the situation? How's it going to play out? We can spell that out. We learned about that. Infrastructure bill. We know the cost, 1.2 trillion. I've got some notes from my previous podcast, which was a little extra research, but we know, how much would be spent on the infrastructure bill, where that's going. Also wanted to point out that Republicans are urging user fees rather than taxes, which means that essentially you and I would pay at, say, the gas pump as a way to fund the infrastructure bill rather than raising taxes on the corporations to fund the infrastructure bill. Because I saw something earlier this week, a friend pointed out to me or made a post that said, oh, well, they want to put user fees in the bill. And it's like, well, they is not the Democrats, they is the Republicans. And so, we need to be clear about who's putting what into the bill. Just because it's a Democrat-backed bill, that's a very misleading headline when it says, oh, they want to put user fees in the spending bill. It's like, well, the we in this case is the Republicans. It's not the Democrats. We need to be clear about who wants to put what in the bill, regardless of who's pushing the bill. So that's there. But then we talked a lot about the spending bill. We learned it's the 10-year Build Back Better Act. It was previously known as the American Families Plan. $3.5 trillion over 10 years, so $350 billion per year. We can spell all that out. We showed that in FY21 we spent $1 trillion on military because we found this really cool website called usaspending.gov that showed us in fiscal year 2021 we spent $1 trillion on the military. National defense. There it is. We have this really cool breakout. Found the new website. Can use it as a source in the future. Break it down by fiscal year. Can break down the total budget numbers, which is what we're talking about today. Pretty easy, right? Found that pretty quick. And then also these numbers, the $60 billion on climate each year, 0.7% of our spending, $350 billion a year on education is all we spend right now. Found that in that chart as well. Then we went through a few articles just to find out, what's the meat and potatoes of the bill. Democrats started at $6 trillion. They're down to $3.5. Manchin wants to go to $1.5. We've got the child tax credit. They want to extend that to 2025. What does that do? It cuts in half, at least in 2021. Child poverty from 13.7% to 6.5%. The bill includes Medicare coverage. Medicare coverage to include dental, vision, and hearing. Lower the Medicare eligibility. Lower the price of prescription drugs. Health premiums cannot exceed 8.5% of your salary. Universal pre-K for 3 to 4-year-olds, saving the average family about $3,000. Also, a cap cannot pay more than 7% of your salary on income on child care if they're younger than 5. Free 2-year tuition. Increased Pell Grants. Pell Grants are a form of student aid. It's a federal student aid grant. 12 weeks of paid parental leave. This is all in the bill. 80%. Not power tuition free, 80% power emissions free by 2030. And then we got some general spending here, just some further breakdown of where the energy is going to go. Not energy, where the spending is going to go, the funding. And then how they plan to pay for it with the tax increases. And I said about the tax increases because they're not high enough. And then just kind of elaborate on what I call minority control, because what we've had in the past is we've had a Republican minority that manages to filibuster their way into stalling out the government to the point where Mitch McConnell had something like 450 bills that the House passed to the Senate that the Senate just never even brought to the floor. Log-jamming progress. They did it with the judiciary in the minority. They held up the judiciary. And they just kind of stonewall. And they push things, no, we're not going to do that. No, we're not going to do that. They're the party of no. They don't have an agenda. They literally don't have an agenda. I put this in an episode before. When Donald Trump won the nomination, they didn't update their party's platform. Every 4 years, each party updates their platform. Traditionally, that's what they do. They go in, they revise and say, hey, we're going to do this. Here's our priorities. With Trump, they didn't. They didn't update their platform. The Republican Party has not updated their platform in over 5 years. Because there's no need to. Because in my humble opinion, they just aren't interested in a platform. All they're interested in doing is slowing down the government, which sows discontent. It paints the picture of incompetence to the American people, which then makes the American people lose faith in their government, which then makes the American people skeptical of their government and want to change the government, become anti-government. And then we see things like January 6th happen. That's how things happen. There is causality. We need to look at. Anyway, getting on a rant. That's for another episode. Anyway, and then we've got minority control in the Democratic Party because we have 268 Democrats who are for the $3.5 trillion spending bill, and we have 2 Democrats who are against it. And those 2 Democrats are enough to hold up the other 268. And that's kind of disgusting because we're talking about the representation of the people. And so, I'm sure the 268 people, Democrats who support the bill, I'm sure their constituencies massively outnumber Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema. And yet the constituents of the 268, they're not having their will exercised because of West Virginia and a county in Arizona. And it's kind of gross. We need to revisit minority control, and there should be limits. And I understand that, we've got all the Republicans voting no too, but this is what our government has become. The very few can thwart the will of the people. And that's what's broken. And then just kind of get into the resolution, what's the path forward? What's my opinion to get the clips there. So that's how I researched my episode. And very quickly, got a lot of facts. I'll piece that together here. I'll go record the clips, then I'll record the episode. Hopefully get this out some point tonight, maybe tomorrow. If you head on over to thenewdeal.com, you can see my past podcast episodes. I've got my blog over there. You can go to medium.com, where I've also got some articles posted. YouTube, try to do more of the videos live on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook right now. This will be posted there. And head on over to Facebook. Go to facebook.com, search The New Deal. I've got the Facebook page where I post, but I've also got the New Deal community group. So if you want to go have some political discussions with some other people, that's what the community group is for. You can post some articles that you see, anything you think is interesting, bring up conversation topics. I'd appreciate that because I like engaging. Thanks for Newman Leary. Especially thanks for listening today. Thanks for your comments. Thanks for driving conversation there for a bit. Pleasure talking to you. Is really happy to hear your insights on those situations. And hopefully in the future we got some other people commenting and we can grow this conversation. So thanks for hanging out with me while I did the research for the episode. I'll get the episode out tonight, tomorrow. It will be on your podcast provider of choice. We got it on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Pandora, you name it, it's there. Search The New Deal. The podcast is there. Check it out. I would appreciate it. Rate and review the podcast. Let me know how I'm doing. Rate and review this. Let me know how I'm doing. I'd appreciate it. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening.